I guess you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Hi, my name is Elvis, and I'm today your host for WebHack Meetup. I think they probably will some member join a little late, maybe waiting 1 more minute for the member join, and then we will start our today's agenda. Yes, so let's also waiting to 32. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I think most people already joined, so I think we can start our today's event now. Okay. So in the beginning, let me briefly introduce our event today. So in our today's according to our today's schedule, I think we will start briefly the introduction about WebHack. And then we will let our speaker to start to do the presentation about today's topic. And in the end, we prepare 10 or 15 minutes for a Q&A. So if you have any detail want to know or any question, you feel free to share your opinion or ask your question in this session. Okay, so welcome everyone. We are WebHack. I'm today your host, Elvis. Let's briefly introduce our group. WebHack, previously we host a physical meetup and occurring probably every 1 or 2 months. And we will count a speaker from the various background and the company, and host this event in the different company, in of the different office in a office in different organizations. And after pandemic, we start our YouTube channel. We transitioned to online and launch our own YouTube channel and continue to host our event virtually. And so far, our community has more than 1,600 members. And with our event, I think there are more than 2,000 attendees join our event because we already have hosted this event more than 16 times. And if you want to share some topic and give a talk, we will feel free to use this link. And I think this is a great opportunity for you to share your technical expertise, and then they work with some individual who are also interested in the same topic. So we also will share this link in the chat. So feel free to use this form and fill the information you want to talk. Yeah. So that's our brief introduction about WebHack. So now allow me to introduce today's speaker, Mesut Durukal, who serves as a QA lead at Indy, who with over 15 years experience across various IT domains, particularly in testing automation, continuous testing, and testing strategy. Mesut bring a vast knowledge about testing, and this session he will offer a great opportunity to let us learn more about how to adapting the Agile testing within the developer process. So thank you everyone, and I will hand over the speak to the Mesut and let you can start your share today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alice. Let me share my screen and we can get started. All right, cool. So, hello everybody, my name is Mesut Durukal. I'm originally from Turkey, but I'm living in Japan for around 3 years. And as Alice briefly mentioned, I'm a quality assurance automation engineer. I'm in industry for about 15 years. And in this session, we will talk about 4 elements of successful test automation. I don't know how many people knows the term or the 4 elements that I'm referring, but on the slide, we can see it is a really very old philosophy. It is coming from the ancient Greek times. And the idea is there are 4 elements in nature, which are the fire, water, air, and soil. And it claims that everything in nature is composed of these 4 elements. And without these 4 elements, we could not sustain a proper life. And what is the relation with this topic? We will talk about 4 elements of successful test automation, like without which 4 elements we would not be able to perform a sustainable testing lifecycle. And this is another analogy, like if you watched the Fifth Element movie, it means that you are old enough. But other than that, it means that you should know the idea of the 5th element, which means in the movie, they were trying to protect the world from some enemies or aliens or something like that. And they had to generate the 5th element by merging the other 4, right? So on this slide, you are seeing another comedy, which is a Turkish movie, and they're making fun of the original movie, which is the 5th element. So they somehow try to collect 4 elements together and try to generate 5th. So the idea is, if any of those 4 elements is missing, then it doesn't work. So what are these 4 elements? If we are missing any of these, we cannot make test automation or the agile testing successfully or properly. Let's see what they are. So we will go over 4 pillars one by one, and we will discuss what are the basics or the fundamentals of those pillars. So it will be a high-level reminders of the good practices, right? Of course, we can talk about each of these in detail. Like if about the quality mindset or the holistic testing, we can talk about it for 1 hour, or even each of them can be a separate session. But this will be like a high-level reminders of the good practices. So they will be, first of all, the quality mindset and holistic testing. The second will be the tool set and the test environment. And then the third will be designing our test cases and building a good test automation architecture. And finally, we will talk about continuous monitoring, continuous maintenance, and of course, continuous improvement. So the first one, before first one, sorry. What effects do they have? Like, why do we care about these 4 elements? Because they have effects from 2 different dimensions, from 2 different perspectives. First of all, on the one hand, it really affects people's motivation, right? Because if they see we don't have a reliable test automation or test execution environment, then they will lose their faith in the test cases. Like if I'm not able to rely on the test results, then basically I will give up to check our test cases, right? Because they don't give the correct results. On the other hand, if I'm not, for example, continuously refactoring or continuously maintaining the test cases, then it will result in some technical debt. The technical debt will grow in time. So both the technical terms and in terms of the psychological terms, it has a lot of critical consequences. So let's get started with the first one, which is the first pillar, which is the mindset. So how can we align ourselves with the correct track? Because if we are trying to move or proceed in the wrong track, then even if we have the good automation skills, even if we have the good tools and we built up a good monitoring, we are already going in a wrong direction, right? It won't work. So what is the correct track? First of all, do we have the complete test suite? What does it mean? How can we build a complete test suite? I will come to this point in a minute. But other than that, do we have any testability issues? Like maybe we have some specifications or features that we cannot test properly. due to some reason, like there might be some issues which happens only in production, and it is too expensive to simulate these conditions in our testing environments, which may only happen with the interaction of the real users, end users. So there can be multiple testability issues. So are we able to cope with this kind of testability issues? Somehow we can create maybe mock stubs or with some other solutions. Are we able to cope with this kind of testability issues? And as we briefly discussed previously, are our test cases reliable? We will come to this point again. What does the reliability mean? And how we can make our test cases reliable? We will come to this point. But let's start with our alignment, like the customer focus. I'm sure most of you guys already saw this comics. It's very famous, but it really explains the situation very well. Like everyone sees the condition from a different perspective, and everyone understands the product or the requirement in a different level, right? For example, when we see the first image on the slide, it says how the customer explains. And then in the second one, we can see how the project leader or the business analyst, whatever, is talking to the customer, how he understands, he partially understands. And then how the programs, the developers build it, maybe better, maybe worse, but definitely not 100% same. And the documentation, there's no documentation because we are doing Agile, right? And how the customer was built, of course, super expensive. And what the customer really needs is again different than what customer explained. So the idea here is we are testing as testers, we are testing the products, right? We are delivering to our customers. How we do that is sometimes we are talking to the developers or maybe sometimes even talking to the product teams, and we are testing what is being developed. But most of the time, this is not what we should test. Because in terminology, testing composed of two fundamentals, verification and validation. What I just described is the verification. What is being developed is working properly. Maybe it is working perfectly. It is a perfect product, but maybe it is not the product that the customer needs at all because it is not validation. Validation means regardless of the product is working well or not, is it the correct product? Is it the valid product that the customer needs? This is the validation. So the QA mindset, the quality mindset should be looking to product from the customer's perspective. Because otherwise, what happens? If we don't look from the customer perspective, we will have some escape bugs, right? The escape bug means the issues or the bugs or the vulnerabilities which were not caught in the testing operations or the testing activities, but which were somehow escaped to production environments and reported from the production environments or the end users. So what's wrong with it? It means it will be much more costly, much more expensive, and maybe even more difficult to fix on a working product, right? Because the product is already in production and we try to change something. If you already found it before delivering or deploying to production, it would be much more easy or cheaper. So again, looking from the customer perspective, walking in their shoes, because on the slide, you will see how the developers or the testers are already used to use this product. They will be testing a lot of times and they will already be familiar with the product, right? But that's not the case for the end users. Whenever you deliver the product, this is especially very important for the mobile apps. For example, if when you download an application, if you find it difficult to use, it is super easy to delete the application. I most of the time do it. Like I try to use some application and I give up. What is this? I cannot use this. It is very difficult. It's not usable. It's not user friendly. And I just delete. I won't use it. So looking from the end user's perspective is again very important. So we are already talking about some looking from another perspective, right? Having the empathy to use as the first time. But how can we grow this mindset? Maybe one approach is following the persona-based testing. Like if we think about different personas, we can cover different use cases. Like personas are generated based on even genders, ages, locations, regions, and then you will come up with lots of different use cases. For example, there can be a senior person, like an aged person, for whom the accessibility features are very important. Or maybe for some other specific profiles, the performance is very important. But for some others, maybe only the very basic functionality is important. So we are already talking about different aspects of quality, right? It's not only functionality, but in terms of non-functional aspects, there are several different quality dimensions. One more fundamental of the quality mindset is the holistic testing. Because sometimes it is super easy to blame or to find someone to blame, right? For example, testers. Why didn't you test it if there's a bug, if there's an issue? Maybe, of course, he or she did, but somehow there's an escape bug. But of course, quality is not performed by individuals. It should be the whole team's responsibility. Because if only you assign quality to only a specific group of people, then definitely you will fail. Because we already talked about testability, right? To cope with testability issues, you have to interact with the developers. You should ask for some additional interfaces, maybe. Or maybe you should talk to the product owners and you should do a prioritization and you should clean up some maybe unneeded features. So you should talk to everyone. Of course, the main responsible can be still the QA. So sometimes we have to act as a quality coach, but the only responsible person is not the quality person or quality team. So in that collaboration way of working, we can properly assign different levels of testing and different maybe even scopes, right? Because in different executions, we run different suites. If in all single execution, if we try to run all the test cases, then we don't have enough resources to do that. So sometimes we have to divide to different scopes or suites, and we have to perform in different levels. So this is possible only with a good collaboration. If we are having silos or communication gaps between teams, of course, there will be some problems, inefficiencies. And on the other hand, sometimes there's duplication, right? So sometimes some test cases already executed in unit level, and we are still trying to run in the higher levels. We are trying to run the same test again and again, although it was already executed. These are all due to some communication gaps and inefficiencies between different parties. Because I'm closing the first part. Last but not least, we are all on the same boat. If the project fails, not only QA fails, everyone fails. We are all on the same boat. Cool. Let's move on with the second part, which is tooling. So this is me. This is a confused me with several tools or frameworks or libraries, right? There are several options. Like whenever you are starting a new project, what language you can use? You can use Java, Python, JavaScript, TypeScript, C, whatever, right? But which one is the best? I don't know. We should find out. Then let's say you somehow decide your program language. Let's say you will use JavaScript. And then which end-to-end automation framework is best for you? Is it Playwright? Is it Cypress? Is it, I don't know, maybe Test Cafe or something else? Maybe just Selenium? Again, so there are several options, right? How can we decide for a robust and decent test automation framework? Let's see what we can do. There are several decision criterion. For example, the execution speed, for example, we can check it out. But of course, this is not the only criterion because ease of coding is also very important. Sometimes some tools are giving you a way to implement in a very easy way. For example, especially for the asynchronous operations, sometimes you just put a keyword, which is just await for the async operation and then just continue. But sometimes the tool is not capable of doing that. You should somehow implement some wrapping operations and wait for the result in a proper way and then continue. So ease of implementation and ease of coding is very important. Very similarly, ease of readability. I will show you some examples and you will see what I mean. Flexibility, like can you run across different browsers? Some tools have some limitations, right? Especially maybe Safari, right? We are living in Japan. So I guess most of the traffic is coming from the macOS or iOS operating systems, which means maybe from the Safari browser. So some tools are not supporting execution on Safari because it's a little bit tricky. Most of the tools by default already supporting Chrome or Firefox already, but some of them are not supporting. So we can take this into mind as well, into consideration as well. Of course, license and cost is also important, and feature compatibility. There are some tricky features, like especially file upload, file download, or maybe like cross-domain testing. For example, you start navigating to some URLs, URIs, and then you jump to another domain. So some tools have some trouble when you are trying to do that, which is called as cross-domain testing. Or like if you have some drop-down menus or new tabs, new pages, these kind of things are not the very basic features, but a little bit tricky features. So you can think all these kind of feature compatibility as well while you are doing your evaluation. So again, which is the best tool? There's no clear answer. You should first define your requirements. What is important for you? Maybe all these kind of tricky features are not important at all. You just have very simple test cases, but you want to run them very fast. So you can just compare the execution speeds. And you just take into consideration if they can support parallelization in full ways, like even inside the same spec file, for example. So all this kind of decision criteria is important to be taken into consideration. Just as an example, just as a literature survey, I will show you one graph in which we can see the download rates for the past 6 months. I just take this screenshot a few days ago, so it's very recent. So in general, what I can say is Cypress was the very dominant tool in the market in most of the countries. I get some results from European countries, US and Asia as well. It was. But recently what I see is, especially like last 1 year, 2 years, Playwright caught a great acceleration and it already start to replace Cypress in most of the organizations. As we see in this graph, like Cypress is still the first, by the way. It is still one of the most commonly used, but we can see Cypress was very low like 6 months ago, but now almost catch the what is the red one, Puppeteer, and very close to Playwright. Sorry, Cypress, which is shown in blue. But again, of course, this is not 100% strict rule, right? You can still decide in your own way. The most important thing is your requirements and taking the proper decision on top of that. But what I recommend is, if you are doing such a POC, please use them, all of them, at least once to implement an end-to-end scenario. In this case, you will have a developer experience and you will see what kind of problems, for example, in which one you had the best developer experience or which one was the easiest to implement. And after putting code side to side, you will see which one is more user-friendly or easier to read, even the readability or the understandability of the code is better than the others. You will have an opinion. And you can generate a functionality matrix and you can mark which one you require and is not supported by the tool. So moving forward, now we are discussing the third pillar, which is designing an architecture. So we already discussed about the mindset, the tooling, and now let's say, okay, we have the proper mindset, we have the good tools, and now it is all up to our implementation skills, right? Let's implement a proper, decent, robust test automation framework. So the main idea is already on this slide, which is do not duplicate, right? Let's see what I mean. So in Japan, again, most of people would know these websites. They are just job-seeking platforms, as we do as well in our organization. They are like Townwork, from a, Rikunabi Next, Rikunabi Haken. Those are all job-seeking platforms, right? They are different websites, but they have the same functionality. So the users can go to these websites and perform some searches. So as a tester, what I'm doing is I can create different repositories to test these websites, and I can implement test cases from scratch, right? This is what I can do because I cannot use the same test case for each of them because the URLs are different. Maybe even the locators are different because elements are same, but designs are different. So what I can do is I cannot use 100% same test case in all repositories, but I can implement some libraries or frameworks which can be reused in several different projects. For example, if I implement a search function in a test case, in a test library, if I deploy it into the cloud services, and if I download it and use it as a dependency in all these different projects, I can already use the search functions, right, which already tries to find the locator, the relevant element by passing the locators. So locators I can already manage in a config file, and I can just pass as a parameter. When I do that, the function itself, which is just finding the text box and just providing the user input and finally clicking the button, is the same. This function can be performed by a common function. So the very basic idea is, the proposal here is trying to avoid duplication and trying to implement reusable functions. Because why? If we have duplication, it will be super tricky to deal with the problems or the issues we have, right? Sometimes we have some test smells. I will come to this point in a minute, what I mean by test smells. But whenever we have them, we have to go to several places because we have duplicated code. Let's say, for example, okay, let me explain one more scenario in which we have to update our test cases. It's not only due to test smells, maybe due to feature updates as well. Let's suppose we have a login step. And in most test scenarios, first of all, I have to log into system and then perform my next test steps. So if I include login step into the spec file itself, then whenever the developers change the login algorithm, for example, I'm not supposed to give my credentials anymore, but maybe just a biological verification, right? Maybe just putting the fingerprints or something else. They just change the login operation. What do I have to do? I have to go to each spec file and change all of them one by one. But what if I already implement this login scenario in a separate class and I just call from the spec files? Then I don't have to change the spec files at all. Just go to the relevant class, which can be a helper class or any separate class, then change the relevant part. And coming back to the previous point, which was the test smells. Test smell, like test framework is a product, right? It is not an end product, which means like it is not a product used by the end users, but still test framework is a product because it has some users. What might be the users of a test framework? Like, for example, there might be some people who try to execute test cases, right? I wrote some test case and I went for a vacation and someone tries to execute my test case. So my test case should be usable, should be easy to understand, should be easy to execute. So thinking about maintainability and robustness, because there might be several users of test cases, we might have some test smells. As while we are developing the product, there might be some code smells. Similarly, when we are developing the test framework, we might have some test smells. Those test smells result in some critical consequences. For example, let me explain two different conditions. The first one, feature is working properly, but test case is failing. What does this mean? I have a false alarm, right? Because I have a notification test failed, but normally the feature was developed as expected. So this is not a real bug, this is a false alarm. On the other hand, second condition, the feature is not working properly. There is an issue, but my test case just passed. So it did not report any failure, which means this is a silent horror case. Because there is an issue, but I'm not aware. Test case did not notify me. So this is a silent horror, which means, as we discussed before, I will have an escape bug, right? Because I'm not able to catch it on time. So all these kind of things are the test smells, and they can result in some critical consequences. There can be several uh, different reasons. I recommend you to go and search for test smells. I guess in literature, almost 500 types of test smells exist. Please go and see, because I want to a little bit speed up to reserve some room for the Q&A as well. But what I can say is there can be several reasons for test smells. Please try to find the root causes and try to solve them one by one. For example, and after applying the solutions, of course, checking before and after situations will give you an idea if your solutions work or not. For example, if the root cause was not waiting for the responses properly, then let's say I implemented a smart polling mechanism, and I can let them run on a pipeline with and without this solution. So I can compare how it contributed, how this solution contributed to my problem. Let's move on. This is the fourth pillar already, which is the continuous maintenance and continuous improvement. When I implement my test cases, I cannot just go home and take a rest, right? It doesn't work like that. Sometimes I implement my test cases and I have to continuously track if it is working well or not. And sometimes, if there are any feature updates, I have to update my test case accordingly. Or sometimes, due to some different reasons, tests just start failing. So I have to fix the test case itself. So I have to continuously maintain test case. And sometimes, without any failure as well, I can just refactor to improve the efficiency. So let's see what we can do to perform a good continuous maintenance. First of all, to be able to perform a continuous maintenance, we need a continuous monitoring, right? We have to see the metrics, we have to see the results, how well we are proceeding in the correct track. Because if we are doing the continuous monitoring, first of all, we can have an insight about our current situation, like what are the current numbers, or what percentage is already completed, what percentage is already failing, or the pass-fail ratio, or several metrics we can collect. I will show you a set of metrics in a while, but the first advantage of doing the continuous monitoring is getting an idea about our current situation. The next advantage is having a future estimation, right? With the same speed, with the same pace, how much further we can proceed. This is the future estimation. If we do a linear prediction, then we can estimate what kind of numbers we will have in the future. So this will give us a chance to take some action items. If we already realize that if we go with the same pace, we will not be able to complete the test executions. So take some action items. That can be doing another prioritization and reducing the scope, or maybe adding some additional resources, because otherwise I will not be able to complete all the tasks. So seeing current situation and seeing the future estimation as well to take some action items. Okay, very cool, makes sense, but what kind of metrics I can collect? Like, I'm sure if we decide to do a small workshop here with the audience here, we can collect again more than 100 metrics to give some idea about the quality of our processes. But we cannot collect all of them, right? It is not feasible. We have to decide to a subset. First of all, what is our purpose? Our very first purpose might be the current motivation might be reducing the test execution time. People are complaining about our long executing test cases. So let's try to reduce our test execution time. Let's say this is our motivation. So first of all, we can generate a subset of metrics which are directly related to this test execution. It can be like the number of slowly running test cases, or let's say like top 5 slowest test cases, or lots of different metrics which are directly affecting the total test execution duration. And then, so in this section, I will show you steps of a good practice to perform a good continuous monitoring. So firstly, decide a subset, and then customize your tools and environments. Because if your tools or environments are not visible enough, are not transparent, you are not able to monitor or you are not able to measure everything happening in your environment. For example, on this slide, I have a life cycle of a test case. For example, let's say if you are using Jira, there are some default status, right? Let's think about the state transition diagram. So you can start with a new test, and then after new, it can be assigned or in progress, whatever, and then it can be completed, right? I guess this is something like that, the default workflow of Jira. But if you customize it, and you can do that, by the way, even by using the APIs of the test tool, then you will have much more transparency. Like you add in design, designed, review, under review, like semi-automated, fully automated, all this kind of status you need. Then you will have the chance to monitor each execution duration for each individual status. For example, for reviewing test case, how much time you spent. You will be able to find it if you customize your test tool in this way. But otherwise, if you just go with the default workflow, which was new, in progress, and done. In progress, but what step of in progress, right? It can be under review or it can be still being implemented. So you don't have the correct or accurate granularity. But if you customize your tools, it will improve your visibility and the transparency. After that, one more step you can improve your continuous monitoring is automating this monitoring or metrics collection. Because normally I can do my monitoring by manual ways. I can just go to Jira UI and perform my filter and just do the query. But I can do the same with the automated queries, right? If I develop the relevant code, I can just let it run on the pipeline. So every night it can collect metrics and it can even parse to assign to different fields. So it will be much more easier to perform in an automated way. And finally, use some monitoring graphs. Because numbers are great, they are already telling a lot of information, but it is not easy to interpret what the raw data is explaining to us. But if we just transform to some different visuals, it can be the monitoring, the dashboards or different monitoring tools, it will be much more easier to understand what's happening in the environments. For example, we can set some limitations, and whenever there's a violation, we can already be alerted by these violations. So using the dashboards and the monitoring tools will ease our processes to understand what's happening, to understand the trends in our testing environments. So a simple application, for example, trying to interpret the bugs. As the QAs, we are trying to find the bugs in our product, right? But how about avoiding them in the first place? Like when there is a bug in the product, of course, we can find it and we can report it. But you know what? As a QA engineer, your contribution would be developing some initiatives which would propose to avoid having bugs in the first place. After having that, if you are finding them, this is a good contribution. But if you are making some suggestions or initiatives which try to avoid bugs which were happening previously, then it's a much more contribution. How can you do that? You can try to collect all the bugs reported previously and try to analyze them. Like what kind of bugs I'm having mostly. Maybe I'm having the same type of bugs again and again. So if I realize this will be already a very good analysis, and I can try to ask some questions to reveal the underlying root cause. Why am I having the same type of bug again and again? Because whenever it's there, I can report and the developers can try to fix it. But why I'm having that in different forms, the same type of bugs showing up in different ways, right? So if I find the root cause, then it will be already a very, very good starting point to improve my processes. And not only about the bugs, but of course, I can collect some different metrics from the production environments as well. So going through all these collected metrics, I can try to do some analysis, and I can try to collect some insights about the improvement rooms, right? Because this is what we are trying to do, the continuous improvement. For that, of course, like especially in terms of the maintenance of the test case, test framework, or the robustness, we need some quality gates, right? But strong quality gates. Like if, as on the slide, if we are letting everything go in production, then it means we are letting risks go into production, because we are not stopping anything. We are not having a strong check. So which means we might have some issues after they are already deployed to our later stages. So I guess we are almost at the end of the presentation. So let's try to sum up what we have discussed. So again, this was just a brief reminders of good practices of an agile, successful test automation approach. First of all, the mindset, quality mindset, which should be very close to the customer perspective. Not forgetting about validation, right? Not only having the verification, but also validation as well. And following some different quality approach, some different test design approaches. And then the holistic testing by contribution of everyone, by trying to eliminate the testability issues. The second pillar was the tooling. Like if we select somehow a different tool, then we might have some issues after we have a lot of technical depth. So making the correct decision at the very beginning is very important. And then even after having them, of course, the implementation way and trying to avoid the duplication in our frameworks is another good practice that we can follow. And finally, doing a continuous monitoring to see in what track we are. Are we proceeding in the correct way? Or because what we discuss in monitoring, we can see our current situation, right? Our current progress and the future estimation as well. So let's try to, not only the numbers, sometimes I see some practices like we are doing the continuous monitoring. Okay, what is the result? There is no result. This is just the numbers. That's not a complete monitoring, right? You can come up with a table like, okay, this is the number of passing test cases. So what? I have 100 test coverage. So what? Sometimes test coverage doesn't mean that all the test cases are very strong. Like you can try to write test cases for each requirement or specification, but maybe they are not catching the corner cases or the maybe some different tricky cases. So not only quantity, but also quality as well. Please do not just try to collect numbers, but also try to interpret them. Try to find some insights, some improvement rooms. So these are the very basic four elements of a successful agile test automation, without which we cannot perform a sustainable test life cycle, right? As we discussed, we cannot sustain our lives in nature without the four elements of nature. So finally, this is just a community that I just started. So if you are interested in QA and test automation related topics, we are having monthly meetings. So do not, please feel free to follow on the meetup.com. And I guess this was the end of presentation. So thanks a lot for listening to me, and I hope we have some time for the questions.
Great. Great. Thank you, Mesut. It's very, literal talk about this topic, and I believe many people probably have some question about the topic, or maybe want to share your own experience while SQL testing. Yeah. So if you want, please raise your hand, and I can let you talk. Yeah. Okay. Okay, probably people are a little shy. Maybe let me ask the question. So I think it's from my personal experience. I think because right now our team run Scrum, so we usually implement the feature and do testing in the sprint. So usually developer need more time to do the new feature, and the QA need more time to do the feature verification. So I think there is some conflict between the developer and the QA. So how can we make sure to balance the time for testing and implementation, and making sure everyone have enough time to do what they need? Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is an important point. Thanks for raising this up. But I guess this is what working agile means, right? Because whenever development teams start working on the implementation, in the meantime, testing teams
Mm
should be able to start in the meantime. Because if the feature is already there, you should know already what you are supposed to verify. But
-hmm.
sometimes, of course, I know in real life it is not working as the definition. Sometimes you don't know anything about the implementation at all, and sometimes you don't even know what is being implemented. Suddenly you saw some features in the product and you ask to the development teams and they say, ah, okay, we implemented this a few weeks ago, and you just learn and you start your working. But the way to prevent these kind of things would be working in a real agile way, which is first of all, again, going back to the first pillar, which was the mindset, right? Holistic testing. So whenever you start working on some new specifications or implementations, please think QA as a part of development. If you just think about development without just discarding the QA, you will just be talking with the developers and you are not notifying the QAs, then you will have this kind of communication issues. QA team will not be aware of the features being implemented. But if you already invite them to the even the requirements meeting, because again, it will be a good way to avoid having bugs in the first place. Because
-hmm.
bugs is not happening only during implementation. They can happen even designing the requirement itself. Even for the requirements, QA can have some feedbacks. So my proposal would be including the QA even from the T0 point, the very beginning of the implementation.
-hmm. Yeah, sure, of course. I think let QA join developer early. It's a good approach.
Mhm.
Yeah, but in real life, yeah, QA still need more time to do. I guess maybe because in our company, the QA do more manual testing than automation testing, so they feel how to say, feel stressed
Mhm.
by time is not enough. Yeah, so yeah,
Mhm.
probably is one reason for that. Okay, thank you for your answer. I will think about how to use this approach to help my team. Yeah.
But
Okay.
it's difficult. I know. Like in real life, in practice, of course, it is difficult to follow this approach.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so do anyone have other question want to talk? Maybe you can raise your hand.
May I have the
Okay.
questions, please?
Okay,
Of
sure,
course.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks a lot for your time and your presentations. I found lots of interesting informations. So I have a few questions, but I think I could start with the like do you really like test? I mean, have you ever like tested the third party libraries or like any third party that involves into your system?
I think you don't have to, right? Because if by definition, if it is a third party tool, then it means it's not in the scope of the product that you are testing.
Yeah, given your teams, they really want to test the third party because of they're afraid of like the possibility of in some time they will change the APIs
I see.
schema or like anything that probably is like an alert that give you a
I see.
heads up here the failures.
You can do that, and personally, I did as well. But this is not a part of testing the product. This is
Uh-huh.
something else. So
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
you can test the test harness itself
Mm-hmm.
and maybe some other tools or platforms which are not the product itself but the supportive tools. you might have to do that, but this is not a part of testing the product.
Yeah, I agreed.
Mhm.
Well, another question is, sorry, may I have another question, please?
Sure, of course.
Given that you're in a team that is where their testing culture is not promoted, so how you deal with that situation?
Just talk to people. Like, again, this is a very common problem, not only happening to you. I guess in most of the companies, sometimes QA activities or QA teams are underrated. And as we just discussed, maybe they're not invited to all the meetings or the development activities. You should just try to convince people about the importance of QA or the quality. Like what quality means to you, right? Normally, everyone should care about quality. So if we are able to explain this importance of quality to people, I think you will start to see how the mindset is changing. This is why we are saying it is not only testing, executing the test cases, but acting as a quality coach as well.
Yeah, I see. I see. Yeah, thank
But
you very
again,
much.
the difficult task.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's really hard to like convince
Yeah.
the like conservative managers. So like without showing them some like clear clues and metrics. So it's really hard to convince them.
So
So
sometimes I have a different presentation. Sometimes I'm presenting in different events. That one is the skills of a software tester. So we need really very strong communication skills as well. So you should be providing enough arguments to convince people, but you should do that in a naive way, in a proper way, not to be too distractive, because you should communicate in a good way and supportive way to convince people, because there should be a balance. Sometimes you are reporting bugs and developers might be even offended by the things that you are reporting, right? It seems like, if you are not very familiar with the processes, it seems like you are pulling their work back, but normally it is not. Of course, you are trying to contribute to the work, but seems like that, might seem like that. So you should be explaining everything properly and patiently, because sometimes it takes time. So please don't give up, and please try to communicate with everyone properly.
yeah, I see. Thank you.
Sure.
Actually, honestly, I still have a very last questions if we have time. I'm sorry for taking the spotlight. So
Oh, yes, yes, it's okay. Please
yep.
ask.
I saw a triangle, a triangle, showing the different level of the testing. So,
Yeah.
but I think, I mean, like in a product that requires a UI, a graphic user interface. So I think sometimes I think the API testing is like not very necessary, or if you already have the set of the end-to-end test. So because when you do the end-to-end test, that means you test through Gal from the back end to front end. So and from that point of view, I don't think the API test is needed at that case.
Like, first of all, you don't, it is not necessarily for the systems which have UI. Even without a UI, like if you have a microservices architecture, you can still apply this test pyramid.
Yeah. I mean, if a service that without the user interface, so the API test is probably, I mean, like is a must. Yeah, but with an app, with a service that actually with your user interface, I think we can skip over the API testing, but the end-to-end testing once we have the end-to-end testing cover the product. So what do you think about that?
I think that would be the anti-pattern, which is explained here, because if you skip API tests, then it means you are mostly moving most of the tests to an upper level, to end-to-end level, right? If you skip API tests, you are trying to cover in the UI level.
Oh yeah,
So
but like
that would
if
not be a very good approach.
Oh, really? Yeah. I mean, because
Because the idea here is in the test pyramid, do as small as possible in the highest level and do more in the lower levels. If you skip API and try to do most of them in the UI test cases are expensive, okay? And they are most of the time fragile and flaky. But API tests are easier, at least more stable. You can just directly call the endpoints and get the response. But if you try to simulate the user interactions, sometimes it's flaky because there are timing issues on the page loads. So the best approach here is do as small as possible in the UI level. It doesn't mean that skip test cases. Please do everything you need. But if you can cover with some API, cover in the API level, in the lower level.
I see. So most of the case that happen in your UI level can be developed from your APIs level, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
I see. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, you can search more for this. This is called as test pyramid. So the idea is cover mostly in the lower levels and move lower scope to the upper levels.
I see. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, good. Thank you, Kai, asking the question, and thank you, Mr. share some thought. And do anyone have some question want to ask or any opinion want to share? Okay, if no one want to share, maybe I ask one more question. Yes.
Sure.
I think when we check the major, we have the thing called we can monitor many different metrics. And in one of the metric, it's a bug find ratio or bug ratio. I want to know if I want to know how to calculate this number. Do you have any recommend like a website document or material I can find? Because I also need to be a developer. I also be asked to measure the bug ratio, but it's a little confusing for me to how to measure this number. Yeah.
Yeah, like again, you can decide within your team, like what level would be a major or what is a minor for you. But there are, of course, some standard definitions, like it is generally like 3 or 4 levels of criticality or the severity of the bugs. And then how you can collect this. For example, this is a real application I did in one of my previous projects. So I export all the Jira tickets and I did different distributions across different. For example, you can show the distribution across their severity levels or across the module on which they were found. For example, in this one, it was a microservice architecture. So most of them are coming from asset service or event service or which one. This is another good distribution. So you can discuss in the team and what is important for you, the level of severity, or maybe the root service from which the bug is coming. So depending on several different dimensions, you can show different graphs according to these dimensions.
Sure, of course. Yeah. I have this question because right now, the goal for our team, the bug ratio is pretty low. So I feel confused about why first, we don't have clear definition for this formula. And the second one is our goal is very low. So yeah, so it's for me to think about how to correctly use this number and how to find the right way to calculate it. Yeah, it's very okay.
I think there's a question in the chat. If we have time, I can.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, sure, of course.
So it was the best and worst architectural patterns I have encountered in professional experience. So I don't want to offend anyone, right? But I saw one project in which there was out of duplication, because this is why I tried to put the slides. So this same test case was implemented again and again for just changing a few parameters. Most of the steps was just exactly same. So if something has to be changed, then you should change a lot of classes or spec files. They can just be moved to some helper classes. So this was one of the worst. One of the best, like it's difficult to say only one, but the practices which are following the practice that I discussed, I can say those are the good architectures or the patterns.
Okay, good. Okay, I think okay, thank you. Nikki shares some ask some question and yeah. Okay, I think nobody raised their hand now and nobody shared the question in the chat. So let me thank you again, Mesut, today's sharing. I think my understanding about the QA is very basic because of being a developer. I only have experience cooperating with a QA, but I have only very basic knowledge about this one. And today I got some new idea and some overall map for how to make a good testing strategy. Yeah, so I feel
Awesome.
I learned a lot. Yeah,
Awesome.
great.
Good
So
to hear that.
yeah, so thank you again, and I hope everyone also enjoyed today's talk, and
My
we
pleasure.
can see you in our next event in the near future. Yeah. Okay. Then thank you everyone. See you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
See you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.